Welcome to Strong Legends, daily sci-fi stories that fuel your mind. Subscribe and join the legend.
The Aurora's light drifted through the inky expanse, its sleek hull flecked with starlight as it glided toward the uncharted nebula, known to navigators as the Sirana Veil. Captain Mara Teshi stood on the bridge's elevated command platform. Eyes narrowed as she studied the swirling eddies of plasma that danced across the viewscreen. To the untrained eye, the Sirana Veil looked like a cosmic breeze stirring dust and gas. But Mara knew better. Rumors had circulated for months among the scientific community. Some claimed it was home to a sentient quantum rift, a phenomenon that could reshape reality itself if properly understood, or wreak unimaginable havoc if left unchecked. Mara's crew of 80 specialists represented a broad coalition of humans and aliens. Astrophysicists mapping dark matter, fluctuations, xenobiologists tracking flitting lifeforms flaring like fireflies against the nebular backdrop, and quantum engineers aiming to record whatever dark secrets the rift concealed. Their mission was nominally peaceful: observe and collect data. But the political undercurrents running beneath Metel Congress's funding were far from benign. Whichever power could claim the rift first might gain control over new hyperspatial pathways or harness energy beyond current comprehension. As captain, Mara was determined that her vessel would stay true to its stated purpose, resisting any murmur of militarization. But there was no denying the tension that coiled in the air. Each crew member sensed that they teetered on the brink of something monumental. The main comm console pinged, interrupting the hum of the subspace sensors. Lieutenant Hosa, a slender violet-skinned xenotechnician, glanced up from her station. "Incoming transmission, Captain," she announced, voice steady. The holographic comm node on the center of the bridge flickered to life, coalescing into the grainy, blue-hued projection of a young human man. His light brown hair lay flattened against his sweat-damp forehead. Fear lurked behind his emerald-green eyes. Mara recognized him instantly. Dr. Elias Caro, a brilliant engineer who was, by now, a living legend among her crew. 2 years earlier, during the Zeshian Trade Summit on the planet Haros IV, Mara's ship, then the diplomatic cruiser Elysian Dawn, had fallen into a pirate ambush. Shattered shields, hull breaches on 3 decks, systems offline. The situation had been dire. Rescue had seemed impossible until a battered freighter materialized behind the pirate corvette, cutting off its retreat. Elias Caro, piloting that otherwise unremarkable freighter, had somehow engineered enough raw thrust to tow Mara's failing cruiser into safe hyperspace. He'd refused any credits for the deed, claiming he'd seen enough lives lost to know what matters. In the years since, rumors of his exploits and technical acumen had spread like wildfire. Now, as Elias's weary face glowed in the hollow projector, his voice came through raspy and strained. "Captain Teshi, it's Elias. You have to help us. We've been scouted by a quantum collapse field near the Andromar expanse. The Celestial Dawn is dead in the water. Our propulsion matrices are fried, hulls breached in 3 sectors, and life supports failing. We won't last more than 12 hours. If anyone can get to us, it's you." A hush fell over the bridge. Although the Aurora's light was nominally a research vessel, it still possessed enough power and shield capacity to rival a small frigate. Yet navigating the Andromar expanse was no trivial matter. The expanse lay at the volatile edge of known space, roiling subspace storms, drifting stellar debris, and gravitational anomalies so unpredictable they'd swallowed entire mineral harvesters without warning. Even seasoned navigators took the region only when desperation outweighed prudence. Still, no one in their right mind would say no to Elias Caro, especially not after the debt of gratitude Mara owed him. She took a steadying breath and rose from her captain's chair, voice soft but resolute. "Helm, plot a course to the last recorded coordinates of the Celestial Dawn. Lieutenant Hosa, amplify our sensor arrays. I want maximum shield modulation and structural integrity at standby. I'll contact Admiral Karan at the Coalition Vanguard if things go sideways." Lieutenant Hosa's fingertips danced across the glowing console. "Aye, Captain. Course laid. In subspace window opening in 10 seconds. As the engines powered up, a low roar pulsed through the hull. The crew felt it in their bones, a vibration signaling the jump into advanced drive. Stars streaked into luminous lines as the aurora's eye. Light vaulted into sublight to hyperspace transition. In moments, their view of the Sirana Veil was replaced by the swirling vortex of hyperspace. Mara allowed herself a momentary exhale. She closed her eyes and tried to recall the face of the younger Elias. His warm grin, oblivious to sector politics, his boundless compassion. She remembered how he'd refused accolades, how he'd joked that anyone could have done what he did, once they decided to care. But she also remembered the look in his eyes when he'd refused to leave her wounded. XO behind as they retreated from the pirate blockade. That look had burned itself into her memory. Fierce determination tempered by empathy. And now he was the one begging for help. The hyperspace jump lasted mere minutes, but for Mara it felt like hours. When white stars coalesced back into the familiar backdrop of known space, the Andromar expanse unfolded before them like a living nightmare. Crimson and sapphire streaks of ionized gas twisted like serpents between jagged asteroids. Subspace storms howled across the void, pulsating spheres of azure lightning that swirled unpredictably. The only guiding star was the faint beacon of the celestial dawn, blinking weakly near the expanse's heart, nearly lost amid the chaos. "Adjust shields to phase gamma," Mara ordered the tactical officer, Commander Wren, as the Aurora's deflector grids shimmered with energetic hues. "Bring us within 20,000 kilometers of their position. Emergency transport range but outside the densest field." Complied. The ship tilted on its axis, engines humming louder as they carved a precarious path through ion streams. Each time they transited a subspace storm, the hull groaned under the strain of torsion fields pushing from all directions. A hail of static danced on the comm lines, but Hosa managed to stabilize the channel so that Mara could speak directly to Elias. Her voice came through the crackling speakers, firm beneath the telltale edge of worry. "Elias, this is Captain Teshi. Can you confirm your status?" After a breath so shallow it seemed he might inhale the void, Elias's voice emerged. "Still alive, but just barely. Crew's making repairs, but hull integrity is down to 30%. External fusillades from micrometeoroids are punching through our main conduits every few seconds. Our atmosphere recycler shut down 10 minutes ago. We've got maybe 6 hours of breathable air." Anguish knotted in Mara's chest. 6 hours. Barely enough time for them to attempt rescue, much less extricate themselves safely. She met Commander Wren's gaze. He nodded when he saw resolve flicker in her eyes. "Captain," Wren reported, "sensors detect multiple hull breaches. They've got a makeshift barrier over the engineering section, but it won't hold. Lower transport shields. Prepare 2 rescue teams. 1 for engineering bay, 1 for general evacuation," Mara said, voice measured. "I'll lead the boarding party." Wren's brow furrowed. "Captain, it's suicide out there, at least for 1 team. The radiation flux is off the charts. Our suits will take damage within minutes." Mara's gaze hardened. "We'll get them out before shields burn through. Ready the auxiliary reactors to power up the shielded EVA pods. We need that window." On the main view screen, the celestial dawn drifted like a wounded leviathan. Its dorsal section was split open, glowing fissures of molten metal leaking energy into the void. The silhouette of its solar sails, once pristine and gleaming, now hung in jagged tatters. Mara's stomach churned. This was the ship that Elias had built from scratch, a living testament to his engineering genius. To see it like this was unbearable. "Transport shields lowered," Hosa reported. "EVA pods at optimal integrity. External conditions hazardous. Radiation, reading at 1500 rem per second." Mara nodded curtly. "Get me a direct feed of their environmental scans. How long before their reactor core goes critical?" "Approximately 2 hours," Hosa said. 2 hours. That didn't leave room for error. Yet Mara's decision was irrevocable. She turned to Lieutenant Hosa and Commander Wren. "Don't argue, prep the crew. We launch in 1 minute." The Aurora's starboard hull bay doors slid open, revealing the swirling chaos outside. The boarding party's EVA pods, sleek, bullet-shaped, modules with combined shield and thruster arrays, hung poised like mechanical guardian angels. Through the reinforced viewports, red and violet arcs of plasma lanced the void. Between them, pieces of rock and debris tumbled slowly, as if reluctant to surrender their course. Mara stepped into her personal EVA suit, its white exoskeleton gleaming under deck lights. The suit's external plates hummed with magnetic dampers, gearing up to repel radiation. She slid her helmet on, the visor locking into place with a crisp click. Inside, heads-up readouts mapped the volatile field, calibrating shield integrity and estimating exposure time. Maximum safe EVA window, 48 minutes. She tightened her grip on the EVA pod's control yoke. All teams report status. EVA. Pod Alpha. Ready, crackled Lieutenant Karras from engineering team. Shields at 98%, batteries at full. Beta, stand by, replied Lieutenant Jor from security team. Ready for deployment. Captain, Wren's voice echoed in her helmet. We've locked a secure tether line. We'll escort you from there. Mara's pulse accelerated. Understood. Launch all pods on my mark. 3 pods hissed as they disengaged from magnetic clamps, drifting toward the celestial dawn with pinpoint precision. Mara's pod led the formation, slipping through a fractured section of the expanse's energy currents. The viewfinder registered each ion flare as a temporal hazard, proximity hazards that could fry a suit's shielding instantly. Yet, she pressed on following the faint distress beacon. Inside the wrecked corridor of the celestial dawn, Dr. Elias Caro crouched beside a fractured fusion conduit. Sparks danced like fireflies from severed energy lines. His breath came ragged as he coaxed the conduit seals to hold long enough for the EVA pod to attach. Around him, his remaining crew, 12 engineers and scientists, worked frantically. Applying nanofiber patches to patch the hull and stabilize pressure, the hiss of escaping air grew fainter by the second. Suddenly, flickering blue light flooded the corridor as the EVA pod's hatch depressurized with a hiss. Mara stepped through the airlock, the pod's shields shimmering into place around her. She raised a gloved hand. Captain Teishi, in your 6 o'clock. Elias panted, his face half covered by a grease-smudged helmet. Relief and exhaustion wrestled on his features. Mara knelt beside him, her voice firm. Elias, how stable is that fusion conduit? Uncertain, he admitted, glancing at the readouts. We're diverting power from the auxiliary capacitors. But we won't hold if the expanse shifts again. We need to reconnect to your auxiliary reactor or we're dead. Mara nodded to Lieutenant Karras, who was already working to splice the Aurora's Light's reactor feed into the conduit network. The ship's auxiliary reactor, a smaller fusion core designed to power EVA operations, glowed softly through the viewing port of the pod's rear. A slender silver cable snaked through an airlock corridor, coiling around the exposed conduits. Splice complete, Karras announced. Redirecting power now. As the link engaged, the corridor's lights brightened. Oxygen levels ticked upward. The hiss of escaping air slowed. Engineers exhaled in relief, gathering around Elias. He looked up at Mara, gratitude and guilt warring in his gaze. I'm sorry I had to call you back into the fire. Mara offered him a small, reassuring smile. No apologies, Elias. You once helped a human in need. Now it's my turn. But we have a bigger problem. Sensors show fluctuations in the Serana. Vale's quantum rift energy spikes we didn't anticipate. It's heading toward a collapse. If it goes critical, this entire expanse will go unstable. We need to evacuate fast. Elias's brow furrowed. Evacuate? But if we abandon the research team, they'll die. Mara studied Elias for a moment. The same intense determination she remembered, now etched with worry and responsibility. Write this down. You saved me when I had nowhere to turn. Now I'm returning the favor. But if we don't get clear in the next 20 minutes, shield protocols can't save us. She tapped the EVA pod's viewport to display their external shields and the crumbling hull of the celestial dawn. We've got 2 options. We pull everyone back to the Aurora now, or we risk a full-scale collapse. I want you to keep your engineering team alive. We'll come back if, and only if, it's physically possible once the rift stabilizes. Elias's shoulders slumped, but he nodded. Understood. Let's move. Mara rose, signaling to Lieutenant Jorv. Secure the corridors and help the crew to the pods. I'll personally oversee the last ops team out. In the narrow corridor, the Riker-like convergence of duty and gratitude played out in the stifling air. Engineers bundled data drives filled with Serana Vale readouts. Scientists clutched devices humming with raw quantum data. Mara struck a mental balance. Loyalty to a friend versus everything they came here to study. But for now, saving lives took priority. Within minutes, all personnel were back in EVA pods, tethered securely behind the Aurora's light. As Mara sealed the hatch on the last pod, sensors blared. The Serana Vale's rift had begun a violent pulse, sending shock waves of gravimetric distortion outward. On the Aurora's light, the captain's console recorded the impending energy cascade, powerful enough to rend the celestial dawn like tissue paper, and maybe drag them all into oblivion. Propel us out of here. Full impulse, Mara ordered, through comm. The Aurora's thrusters roared as they engaged for maximum thrust. Behind them, the celestial dawn slipped into view, its form still intact, but battered. Then a flash. A brilliant cascade of violet and blue light bloomed at the center of the Serana Vale, like a dying star letting go. Mara's heart hammered as she watched the rift contract violently, drawing energy inward until it vanished in an instant, leaving behind an ethereal haze of residual quantum particles. The shockwave rippled outward, an invisible tsunami racing through the expanse toward the scattered debris field. "Shields up! Brace for impact!" she bellowed. The Aurora lurched as the shockwave slammed into its deflector shields, sending vibrations rippling through every deck. Inside the EVA pod, Mara felt her bones hum with kinetic stress. She gripped the control yoke as the tether line groaned, protesting the force tethering them to the mothership. Through the pod's viewports, the celestial dawn vanished in a burst of white-hot energy, fragments of hull and solar sails torn from their moorings. Elias's pod jolted violently, but Lieutenant Karras kept their shields aligned long enough to push him clear. "Captain, we're clear," Karras shouted over comm. Her voice echoed with relief. "Targeting vector confirmed. We're on rescue. Heading." Mara exhaled. "All pods, disengage and proceed to landing bay. Let's bring them home." As the Aurora fell away from the maelstrom, the unsettling hush left in the rift's wake became deafening. The debris field drifted listlessly, jagged asteroids and shattered ship fragments floating like forgotten relics of a cosmic storm. But amidst the haze, Mara knew one thing. They had bought themselves, bought Elias and his team, a chance. If ever there was a debt to be repaid, it had begun today. When the last EVA pod docked and the airlock cycled open, Mara stepped out into the dock's cool, sterile light. Elias Caro, unsteady on his feet but alive, strode forward. Without preamble, he wrapped her in a fierce embrace, not typical for a stoic captain, but he was no ordinary engineer. "You came," he murmured, voice thick. "I didn't dare. Hope." Mara patted his shoulder. "You saved my crew once, my turn." He drew back, eyes brimming. "You're not just any captain. You're the one who believed in me when no one else did." Mara smiled wryly. "Don't get sentimental. There's a debrief waiting in the conference room and Admiral Corrin wants answers. Ideally ones that don't involve my death." Elias let out a shaky laugh. "No rest for the nearly dead, I guess." She offered him a hand. "Come on. There are a lot of lives depending on what we do next, mine and yours included." As they made their way down the corridor, crews exchanged looks of awe and relief, repositioning data cores and fastening down loose equipment. The Aurora's light hummed with renewed purpose. Overhead, the void beyond the thick viewport was calm at last. No more purple arcs, no more stormy broil of the Serana Vale. But every seasoned spacefarer aboard knew that beneath that tranquil facade lurked mysteries yet to be solved and dangers yet to be faced. In the center of the bridge, Mara Teishi allowed herself a brief moment to reflect. A crisis had passed, but questions remained. Who had activated the quantum rift? Why had it destabilized so violently? And what long-reaching consequences lay hidden in the data Elias and his team had salvaged? She turned to her XO, Commander Wren, who was already initiating data transfers. Everything had changed in the span of half a day. An old debt repaid, new loyalties forged, and a quantum mystery dangled before them like a sword over a freshman cadet. The catalyst had been lit. And soon, Mara Teishi would learn that sometimes the price of saving a life was an entire galaxy's fate. The journey from the Sirana Vale to the Andromar Expanse was short in hyperspace, barely 12 minutes of tunnel white light, and yet it felt interminable. Captain Mara Teishi stood at the bridge's forward viewport, watching the swirling colors of the expanse coalesce into something tangible. A landscape of jagged asteroids bathed in crimson-tinted ionization, punctuated by roiling pockets of sapphire-hued plasma. The Andromar Expanse had earned its reputation, a forsaken realm at the galactic rim, where subspace storms danced unpredictably and gravitational anomalies lurked behind every drifting fragment of stellar debris. "Shields are at phase gamma," reported Lieutenant Hossa, her slender fingers darting across the tactical console. "We're entering the Expanse's outer boundary. Radiation levels are spiking, thermal readings at 800 kelvins near the periphery. If we push any farther without modulation, the hull plating will blister." Mara drew a steadying breath. "Maintain current heading. Activate reinforced deflector. Screens and raise the auxiliary reactor's output to full. We need maximum shield tonnage if we're going to reach the Celestial Dawn." She glanced down at the comm display. Elias Caro's crew, 12 engineers and scientists, were jerry-rigging the ship's power distribution to buy themselves more minutes. As far as human lives were concerned, every second counted. "Acknowledged," Hossa replied. On the viewport, the Aurora's light shuddered slightly as its deflector grids reconfigured. A faint blue shimmer spread across the forward hull, dancing like ripples over water. Commander Wren, seated one deck below in the tactical pit, monitored trajectory corrections. "Course is stable, Captain. We're on approach vector, targeting a position 20,000 kilometers from the Celestial Dawn. ETA 5 minutes under current acceleration." Mara nodded. She turned to Lieutenant Yorv, who manned the EVA liaison console. "Confirm, EVA. Pod status." "Alpha and Beta pods fully charged," Yorv replied, his deep voice echoing through the bridge comm. "Shields at 96% integrity, thrusters functional. Preloading docking transponders now." "Perfect," Mara said. "Once we're clear of these outer ion streams, we deploy. I want 2 teams, one to patch life support, one to secure the reactor. Karis leads engineering, Jorv leads security. Understood?" "Understood, Captain." Both officers answered in unison. Mara cast one final glance at the viewport. A fractured ring of asteroids loomed ahead, illuminated by intermittent bursts of ionized energy. Beyond it, the Celestial Dawn hung like a wounded leviathan, its dorsal hull split open, energy conduits exposed, solar sails shredded into tatters. Each glowing fissure bled radiation into the void. Mara's gut clenched. The sight of Elias's ship in such ruin made the dread in her chest tighten. "Steady as she goes," Mara ordered. "Keep shields at maximum modulation. No shortcuts." Lieutenant Hossa's fingers flew. "Cutting main power draw to non-essential systems, redirecting to shields. Hull temperature stabilizing at 650 kelvins." Commander Wren monitored the OC tactical display, where a web of green and red vectors represented converging energy currents. "Subspace storm edge approaching port side in 2 minutes. We'll have to punch through carefully, avoiding the eye, or we risk a hull breach." Mara nodded. "Divert inertial dampeners. We'll navigate around the storm's periphery, safest path to their coordinates." On the viewport, the ionized plasma streams twisted like serpents. The Aurora's light swung on its yaw axis, skirting the deadlier core. A sudden pulse of static ran through the shields, a minor concession to the Expanse's wrath. Below decks, The engineers of the Aurora held grim vigil over the auxiliary reactor, keeping its output hovering at 142% of nominal, enough to fuel the EVA pod's enhanced shielding. 2 minutes later, with the Aurora finally clear of the worst of the ion flows, the beacon from the celestial dawn grew brighter. Its automated distress beacon pulsed with ominous regularity. One flash every 8 seconds, each blink a reminder of mortal peril. Lock onto their transponder, Mara directed. Begin deceleration. The engines reversed thrust, and the Aurora shuddered as it slowed. On the tactical holo projection floating above the bridge table, the distressed vessel's icon glowed red. The field surrounding the celestial dawn was a chaotic tapestry, crimson arcs of ion energy entwined with drifting flints of rocky debris. Even from 20,000 kilometers out, the radiation readings hovered near lethal. Mara felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise. Lieutenant Hossa tapped a sequence on her console, bringing the Aurora to impulse at half power. Shields at 85%, holding. Ready the docking clamps, Mara instructed. I want each EVA pod deployed 40 seconds after we reach station keeping. Wren's overlay showed a stable holding pattern. The Aurora drifted on course, thrusters firing occasionally to compensate for gravitational eddies. Position locked, Wren confirmed. Mara exhaled. Launch EVA pods. With a gentle hiss, the starboard hangar bay's outer doors slid open. 3 bullet-shaped pods hovered like silent sentinels, their white exteriors glowing faintly through the retracted shields. Marathon thrusters engaged, pushing them out into the void. Each pod carried 2 specialists, Alpha Pod, Mara and Karis, Beta Pod, Jorv and 2 medics, and Gamma Pod, Hossa communicating with command and ready to assist on standby. From within, her pod's reinforced viewport, Mara watched as the celestial dawn grew from a pinpoint to a hulking mass. The thruster's magnetic grapplers engaged with the dawn's outer hull, anchoring the pods. In the intercom, she heard Jorv's voice. Taut with focus. We're locked. Pod shields at 90%, minimal degradation so far. Good, Mara replied. Karis, follow me to engineering. We patch those conduit ruptures. They'll fry the fusion core if we don't stabilize it. Karis, helmeted and resplendent in a tailored EVA suit, nodded. Let's move. They exited the pod into the external docking corridor, a narrow tube of reinforced alloys, its walls humming with magnetic dampeners that repelled the expanse's radiation. Each step they took brought the eerie glow of the dawn's torn hull into sharper relief. Jagged metal plates jutted out like broken teeth, and sparks pulsed where power conduits had been severed. Inside the corridor, the airlock chamber had been patched from within with crimson-hued polymer gel, temporarily sealing what remained of the pressure system. But every few seconds the gel flashed and flickered as it struggled against microfractures. Ahead, the corridor diverged, left to life support engineering, right to the main fusion core. Through the airlock viewport, Mara could make out Elias, Caro's silhouette huddled over a flickering holographic console. Karis, you head to the outer conduit junction, Mara instructed. I'll join Elias and set up the temporary feed from our pod. We need to route auxiliary power into their network. Life support has to come first. Karis merely inclined his head and sprinted down the branch to the conduit junction. Mara pressed on down the main corridor. Moments later, she ducked into the Celestial Dawn's engineering bay. Drab gray bulkheads flickered under the glow of emergency lighting. Engineers, some limping, some gaunt-faced, crowded around a fractured fusion conduit that dangled like a shredded ribbon. Sparks cascaded from exposed wiring, each flash illuminating the soot-streaked walls and the ambient haze of ionized particles. Elias. Caro didn't look up at first. His shoulders sagged and a bead of sweat caught the flickering red light as he struggled to fit a nanogel patch onto a ruptured coolant manifold. When he finally glanced at Mara, relief and guilt warred in his emerald eyes. Mara, he gasped, voice taut. I didn't think I'd see another human face. These patches won't hold long enough. We redirected the auxiliary capacitors here to keep us alive, but the main coolant lines lost integrity. If the flow falters, the core goes critical. In under 90 minutes, Mara knelt beside him, scanning the console readouts. We've got our pod's auxiliary feed ready. Once Karis hooks into the reactor conduits, I can override their fail-safes and transfer enough power to stabilize the plasma injectors. It'll buy us time, but we have to do it quickly. Elias's jaw clenched. Do it. Every second counts. Over. The comm. A crackling voice came from Lieutenant Hosa in Gamma Pod. Captain, we're detecting unusual fluctuations in the Serana Vale's quantum rift. Energy spikes roughly every 7 seconds. We didn't account for this pattern. If the cascade continues, it could send a gravimetric distortion wave sweeping through the expanse. Mara exchanged a glance with Elias. Noted, but right now we save lives. She turned back to Elias. Hold steady. Karis, status? Karis's voice crackled through the comm. I'm at the conduit junction, sealing splice on main feed. Now, solid binding. Routing power link in 3, 2, 1. The corridor blinked with a surge of blue light as the splice took hold. Splice complete. Reactor feed engaged. The engineering bay's emergency lighting surged to full brightness as auxiliary power roared into the fusion core. The hum of active cooling filled the chamber. Engineers exhaled in collective relief as coolant levels stabilized. Monitors, once red with warning, flickered green. Life support's back online, Elias announced, voice trembling. Atmospheric pressure rising to 87%. Oxygen recycle operational. Temperature holding at 21 Celsius. Mara let out a slow breath. Good work, everyone. But we're not out of the woods yet. Kernels in their quantum sensor array show that rift instability is growing. If that fluctuation escalates, we'll have less than 30 minutes before the shockwave hits. Elias's eyes narrowed. Then we need to get this crew out. Fast. Once the patches hold long enough, I want to start preparing data cores. They need to be transported before we... He let the sentence hang, knowing a full-power reactor collapse was unthinkable. Mara gave him a firm nod. Karis will seal your conduit junction fully. We'll prepare the evacuation pods. She glanced at her helmet's readout. 56 minutes of safe EVA left before radiation exposure became fatal. Lieutenant Karis, status? The comm crackled. Hull junction sealed, Captain. Reactors on backup. You have 10 minutes before stabilization fails. Prepping for evacuation. Copy that, Mara replied. She turned to Elias. Get your team moving toward the pods. I'll oversee the last structural checks. She tapped the comm unit at her ear. Alpha Pod, rendezvous at the main airlock in 5. Understood, Karis's voice answered. As Elias gathered his crew, a ragtag assembly of engineers cradling battered datapads and scientists hauling specialized sensors, Mara slipped away to inspect the airlock's structural integrity. The plating bore scars where micrometeoroids had grazed it, each pockmark a testament to how lucky they'd been so far. Panels flickered as power modules strained under the expanse's glare. Another alarm sounded on her personal HUD. A seismic tremor pulsing through the celestial dawn's hull. The ship groaned around her. Ahead, the serrated outline of the fusion chamber resonated, accompanied by the low, ominous thrum of strained containment fields. Mara, Karis's voice crackled urgently. We've got a microfracture in the lower hull near the aft bulkhead. I can seal it, but it'll take time. Possibly longer than you have. Mara's heart clenched. She weighed time versus safety. Do it, she commanded. Seal it tight. We'll pick you up if you don't. Make it to the pod. Karis hesitated. You sure? Mara met his gaze. I'm sure. Get it done. Going in, Karis said. The corridor lights flickered around her as he rushed to the breach. With the engineering bay and crew secure, Mara moved to the central passage where the evacuation pods were docked. 2 pods remained, the one she'd ridden in and Beta Pod. Gamma Pod hovered beyond. Unable to reach due to field disruptions near the rift's fringe, she keyed her comm. Elias, have your people board Beta Pod immediately. On it, he replied. Mara knelt beside the pod's external hatch and ran a quick diagnostic on its shields. 92% integrity. The thrusters would function, for evacuation but barely for any more maneuvering. The aft compartment hummed with stored supplies and emergency medikits. One by one, Elias's engineers and scientists climbed aboard. Their faces were drawn, but determination burned in each pair of eyes. They clutched data cores, sleek crystalline drives encoded with every recorded reading of the Sirana Vale's rift thus far. For Mara, those cores represented knowledge that might save lives elsewhere. She could not allow them to be lost. At the pod's hatch, Elias lingered, staring back at the engineering bay. Kara still inside, sealing that breach. Mara frowned. If he's not in 20 seconds, we have to go without him. Elias's jaw clenched, torn between loyalty to a friend and the imperative to survive. Before he could speak, a deafening blast shook the corridor. The celestial dawn convulsed as if struck by an invisible fist. The lights flickered violently. Alarms blared within the ship, and a deep, resonant hum echoed like a morning chant. Mara's HUD registered the core's containment fields destabilizing. A cascade of energy rippled through the hull. Somewhere down the corridor, Karas's voice crackled. "Captain, I've got the breach closed. But the reactor's venting plasma. Intense radiation spikes. I'm heading to the pod now." "Get to safety," Mara shouted over the roar. She reached out, her hand brushing Elias's shoulder. "Go. Now." Elias hesitated, eyes flicking. To the corridor and back to Mara. Then, as if drawn by gravity, he turned and sprinted toward the pod's airlock, guiding his team. Mara stayed behind, fist pressed against the bulkhead as she watched the corridor's flickering lights. She squinted through the viewport. Heavy radiation flared around Karis as he ran, but the EVA suit held. Seconds later, Karas's pod jettisoned from its docking clamps. The hatch sealed, and the pod glided away, its shields flickering under the expanse's barrage. Mara exhaled, relief and dread mingling in her chest. "Everyone aboard?" she asked, slipping into Beta Pod's hatch. The small cabin smelled of recycled air and fear. Elias knelt beside Karis, who had collapsed into a stasis cot, his suits, internal systems straining to keep him alive. Mara's eyes darted to his HUD. Karas's life sign vitals were rapidly dropping. "Medical infusion units online," she ordered the two medics. "Administer neurostims and stabilize his vitals." The medics worked swiftly, injecting autogenous nanites into Karas's suit port, slowly. His breathing steadied, and Karas's eyes fluttered. He blinked once, then smiled weakly. "Thanks. Too close." Mara allowed herself a brief smile. "No thanks needed. Get some rest when we're clear." Outside, the pod's shields shimmered as they disengaged from the celestial dawn. Mara keyed her helmet's external mic. "Beta pod to Aurora, launching, ready to boost." On the Aurora's light, the sensors read a violent spike as the rift's energy pulse roared through the expanse. Lieutenant Hosa's voice crackled over comm. "Captain, we're losing position hold. The shockwave is destabilizing our thrusters. You need to get clear. Now." Mara glanced at the viewport. The celestial dawn was a distant silhouette, already half engulfed by the expanse's turbulent eddies. Beta Pod's thrusters flared, pushing them away. The pod tumbled slightly as gravimetric currents tugged at it. Mara gripped the control, yoke adjusting vector to align with the Aurora's guide beacon. "Engage thruster sequence to match velocity," she instructed Elias, who was now manning one of the pod's auxiliary control consoles. "Come on, let's get you home." Just as Beta Pod's shields fluttered under an unseen force, a wave of violet-blue energy rippled through the viewport, an echo of the rift's collapse pulse. The pod groaned as shields strained to hold. Inside, the lights dimmed for a heartbeat, before stabilizing. "Pod shields at 70%, Elias reported, sweat beading on his brow. Behind him, the medic secured Karis to the pod's medical rack. Mara keyed her comm. "All pilot personnel, align on docking vector. We're coming in hot." The pod quaked again as another pulse rocked the expanse. Debris field tremors scattered, smaller fragments into a frenzied dance. "Receiving you," Ren's voice came through, composed despite the chaos. "Docking clamps ready. Hold your approach steady." Mara exhaled and pitched the pod slightly starboard. The Aurora's hangar bay doors yawned open into the void. Beta pod's thrusters burned to compensate for a sudden lateral drift as a stray piece of asteroidal debris slammed into its aft shield. A crackling hiss ran through the hull as small fissures appeared on the viewport, but the pod held. "Shields at 55%, Elias announced, voice taut with tension. "We're close. 30 meters to docking clamps. Brace for turbulence," Wren warned. The pod's shields flared red as the impact of a secondary gravimetric shift battered the hull. The docking guides jettisoned microthrusters to stabilize orientation. Mara's knuckles whitened on the yoke as they locked into place. With a final jolt, Beta pod's docking collars clamped onto the Aurora's internal guide rails. "Docking. Successful," Wren confirmed. "Pressurizing bay. Now." The hangar bay's airlock cycled open with a pneumatic hiss. Medical techs and EMTs streamed into the pod to assist Karis and the other crew. Mara exited first, helmeted but unflinching, her gaze sweeping the bay for any additional survivors. Elias disembarked next, pausing to glance back at the viewport. The fragmentary ruins of the celestial dawn drifted farther away, swallowed by the ragged outskirts of the expanse. A faint, distant glow marked where the rift's collapse had drawn the ship's remains into the void. Elias's shoulders sagged as he exhaled. "She's gone." Mara placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Her crew made it. The data cores are safe. That's what matters now." He nodded, but grief lingered in his eyes. "We have dozens of harvester teams in the expanse, scientists risking everything to chart these anomalies. The rift, we can't let it do this again." Mara met his gaze, steeling herself. The bridge's viewport now revealed the Aurora drifting on impulse far from the epicenter. The expanse's stormy veil glowed faintly at the horizon, a silent testament to near catastrophe. "We will study it," she said. "But first, we recover." Behind them, Karis, now stabilized in the infirmary, sighed as medics checked. His vitals. Lieutenant Hosa remained at the tactical console, her eyes fixed on spectral readings. Mara approached her side. "Hosa, give me everything on that rift spike pattern," Mara ordered softly. "We need clarity. How soon could it collapse again? And what triggers these pulses?" Hosa's fingers flew over the interface. "I'm overlaying our Serana Veil data with live Andromar readings. The cycles are shorter than what Elias's team predicted, 6 minutes between major flux events. If we don't find a way to dampen the quantum resonance, the next collapse could be catastrophic, on the scale of fracturing local spacetime." Mara inhaled slowly. "Plot a course back to the Serana Veil data nodes. We'll analyze every fragment from Elias's cores, cross-reference with our own logs, find a resonance frequency we can counteract." Hosa nodded, already synthesizing data. Commander Wren stepped up beside them, looking at Mara with gravity in his expression. "Captain, the fleet has been informed of the rift's instability. Orders are coming. Do not engage directly until we have a containment strategy. Admiral Corrin's vector is en route, but we're on our own until she arrives." Mara's posture stiffened. "Understood. For now, we're the only line between that rift and everything else. Prepare to depart on hyperspace. We need to be back at the Serana Veil data cluster within the hour." Wren's lips compressed. "Aye, Captain." Elias approached, data core clutched in his gauntleted hand. "Mara, I owe you everything I'm about to discover. Once we're in the lab, I'll run our joint analysis. I want to know, why did the rift collapse when it did and whether we can shut it down?" Mara gave a curt nod. "We will. But first, rest. You and your team need time to recover. We're giving you access to the medbay, and we've made room in the crew quarters. We'll rendezvous in the lab in 30 minutes. Elias's shoulders eased, though weariness clung to his every movement. "Thank you." Mara watched him retreat down the corridor toward the medical wing, escorted by 2 medics. She turned, back to the viewport where the Andromar expanse still brooded, its swirling currents of ion gas and drifting debris shimmering under distant starlight. Had they truly escaped the worst? Or was this only a brief reprieve until the next quantum pulse? A gentle chime from her comm console brought Mara's attention back to the bridge. She tapped the control. "Captain Teshi here." "Hosa," came her communications officer's voice. We've finalized the hyperspace vector. Jump will commence in 90 seconds. Mara inclined her head. Understood. Post-jump, have all engineering teams prepped for immediate lab integration. Elias's cores are priority 1. Inform the science directorate to prepare a secure node. Only senior quantum engineers and xenophysicists allowed. We can't risk data contamination. Hosa's tone softened with concern. Aye, Captain, are you all right? Mara paused, tracing the patterns of fractured starlight beyond the viewport. She inhaled the sterilized air of the bridge, tasted a hint of recycled hope in her lungs. I'm fine, she said at last. We saved lives today. That's what counts. Now we make sure we have the answers to save thousands more. Lieutenant Hosa nodded and tapped a sequence into her console. The viewport dimmed momentarily as engines shifted into hyperspace alignment. Mara straightened, shoulders firm. The bridge around her buzzed with quiet urgency. Data streams converging, diagnostics running, teams awaiting her orders. Engage, she commanded. A sudden cascade of starlight blossomed across the viewport as the Aurora's light dove into hyperspace. Behind them, the Andromar expanse receded, its turbulent glow slipping into streaks of sapphire and crimson. For a moment, all was silent. No pulsing rifts, no weary engineers, no fear of impending collapse. Only the boundless corridor of hyperspace. But Mara knew better than to relax. The rift's instability loomed over every star in their path. Somewhere in those vast reaches lay the answers they needed. A way to stabilize quantum resonance or risk an entire sector annihilated. As hyperspace currents tugged at the ship, Mara's gaze hardened with resolve. They had survived the first collapse. Now they would fight the next, together, and thus the Aurora's light sailed into the unknown, carrying the fragile hope of a galaxy on the brink. The descent into peril was not over. It was only just beginning. The Aurora's light emerged from hyperspace into the outer fringes of the Sirana Veil in the early sliver of Garan time, just past Galactic Standard Aero 713, though Mara Teshi seldom tracked hours so rigidly. The nebula's streaks of violet and cerulean still whispered of the quantum rift's unsettled energies. But from this distance, the swirling haze appeared deceptively serene. In the 2 hours since they evacuated the Celestial Dawn, Mara and Elias's teams had worked tirelessly in the ship's clandestine lab, cross-referencing every quanta reading and waveform recorded before and during the collapse. On the Aurora's bridge, Lieutenant Hosa's slender fingers danced across her console. I've overlaid Elias's data cores with our Sirana readings, she announced. We've isolated the resonance pulses triggering each cascade. There's a narrow frequency window, roughly 4.2 and 17 terahertz, that, if we can disrupt it, continuously should prevent the rift from entering a collapse state. Mara nodded thoughtfully. Which means we need to generate an opposing harmonic field. Complex modulation tech at terascale. Do we have the components? Hosa tapped her stylus against the display. We could retrofit the auxiliary antimatter containment rings into phase array modulators, but it's risky. The flux is volatile. If we miscalculate, we might inadvertently amplify the rift's resonance. The captain's gaze flickered to the viewport, where roiling clouds of ionized gas pulsed like a cosmic heartbeat. Risky or not, it's our only shot. Contact Admiral Karan and request immediate coalition support. We need every quantum computer, every phase array generator in the fleet. Her words reached Admiral Leandra Karan's flagship, the Resolve, Eternal, which was already tracing a direct route toward the Sirana Veil after receiving Mara's distress call. Through the comm, Karan's calm, authoritative tone echoed in the Aurora's comm channels. Captain Teshi, we're en route with Zeshian Armada, Mavar Collective, and Terran Star Coalition vessels. Estimated time to Sirana's perimeter, 14 minutes. Mara's jaw tightened. We'll reach the lab in 10. I want every science bay prepped. Relay this to Dr. Caro and Commander Wren. On the lab deck, Dr. Elias Caro hovered over a crystalline data lattice, his gaunt face illuminated by pulsating holographic projections. Beside him, a contingent of xenophysicists and quantum engineers from 5 different species debated the best approach for orchestrating the harmonic nuller. Each projected waveform danced upon lithium-based crystal arrays. Carakex matrices tuned precisely to 4.217 terahertz. When Mara and Hosa stepped into the lab, silence fell. Elias rose, rubbing the back of his neck as he greeted them. "We've built the prototype, antenna arrays embedded into our auxiliary rings. But we'll need massive power reserves from the coalition ships to sustain continuous oscillation." Mara met his gaze. "I just confirmed Admiral Karan's fleet will arrive in under 10 minutes. Once the Resolve Eternal reaches position, we'll link our systems. Hosa, relay the harmonic coordinates to Admiral Karan now." Hosa's fingers snapped against her console. "Coordinates sent," she acknowledges. "They'll establish a phased subspace relay to amplify our nuller. They're mobilizing the Talana-class carriers as primary emitters." Elias exhaled, tension etched across his features. "Once we activate, the rift's resonance should collapse inward, like synchronized vibration-shattering glass. But if any node goes offline prematurely, the backlash could amplify the quantum flux tenfold." Mara placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We'll hold it together. This is what you and your team prepared for. Trust your work." 10 minutes later, the Aurora's light settled into position beside the Resolve Eternal at the Serana perimeter. Through the viewscreen, an armada of sleek capital vessels and nimble escorts formed a prismatic semicircle around the nebula's fringes. Zacian dreadnoughts, adorned with intricate glyphs of ancient lineage, floated alongside Mavar kinetic frigates, each hull plating shaped like the ribbed shell of a cosmic mollusk. Terran cruisers, their hulls glinting under distant starlight, interposed between the alien ships, a testament to solidarity transcending millennia of interstellar politics. On the Resolve Eternal's bridge, Admiral Leandra Corin watched the rift through a magnified holoprojection. Her silver hair framed an unwavering expression. "All primary phase array emitters are online," she reported to Mara over the open comlink. "The 4.217 terahertz nuller is stabilizing at 74% power. We're awaiting full calibration from your end." Mara stood at her console on the Aurora, surrounded by a half-dozen quantum engineers wielding gauntlets that emitted soft, undulating hums. "We're live," she called, initiating harmonic sweep across phase array modulators. Tiny conduits glowed as chaotic currents funneled into oscillation coils. Elias and his engineers whispered final checks. He looked at Mara. "Sync nodes?" "Locked," she said. "Hosa?" "Waveform alignment stable at 98%. Minor deviations." "In the rift signature, but within tolerance," Hosa replied. "Admiral," Mara transmitted, "we're at full power. Proceed with subspace relay amplification." The view through the Aurora's viewport trembled as a violet-blue lattice burst forth from the Resolve Eternal's primary emitters, cascading outward like ripples in a cosmic pond. The Zacian, Mavar, and Terran ships joined the chorus. Harmonic beams converged upon the nebula's epicenter. In the lab, each of Elias's crystalline antennae flared with chaotic energy, synchronized to their coalition counterparts. The entire armada, a fleet of over 300 warships and research vessels, became a single titanic instrument. On the Aurora's bridge, Mara's knuckles whitened as she watched the rift's edges shimmer. "I'm reading rapid resonance. Dampening. 25%. She exhaled through clenched teeth. "Keep it steady." Suddenly, alarm klaxons shrieked from Hosa's console. "Captain, the rift is trying to bleed energy into subspace. Secondary fluctuations at 4.3 terahertz. It's decoupling from our nuller." Mara's heart skipped a beat. She turned to Elias, whose eyes reflected grim resolve. "Can you adjust?" Elias typed a rapid series of commands into the hollow interface, rerouting 2.1% of power from auxiliary modulators, engaging harmonic counterphase. Outside, the harmonic beams warped, bending subtly as the counterphase arrays realigned. The rift's glow hissed, convulsing like a wounded leviathan. "Resisting capture. Resonance dampening at 50%, Hosa shouted, her voice nearly lost in the cacophony of alarms. Hold together. 65, 70%. The composite harmonic lattice reached a crescendo. The shimmering wall of violet blue collapsed inward, narrowing like a funnel collapsing to a pinprick. At 4217 terahertz, every node pulsed, in exact opposition to the rift's energy. Then, with a soundless implosion, the rift blinked out, its luminescence extinguished in an instant, leaving behind a plain white glow where once chaos had reigned. A stunned silence gripped the fleet. On the bridge of the Aurora, Mara's lungs ached as though she'd been holding her breath the entire time. Hosa's voice trembling filled the comm. Resonance at 0. No further quantum flares. The rift is stabilized. Mara let out a long exhalation. Thank the stars. She turned to watch the Sirana Veil through the viewport. Its turbulent eddies now held a gentle swirl, no longer on the brink of cataclysm. Elias stepped beside her, his face alight with relief. We did it. Mara met his gaze. We did. Moments later, Admiral Corrin's voice crackled over the comm. Good work, Captain Teshi. The fleet is standing down. Zetian and Mavar ships are carefully backing away. Terran frigates are confirming no residual quantum imbalances. You have the floor. On the Resolve Eternal, Mara's image flickered on the hollow projector at the rear of the Aurora's bridge. Admiral Corrin, your fleet's unity under dire circumstances has saved untold trillions of lives. The Coalition's swift response, every nation, every star nation working in unison, is a testament to what we can achieve when we look beyond our borders. Corrin's holographic visage nodded, her silver eyes stern yet proud. Captain Teshi, do not forget the debts you and Dr. Caro have unlocked. Your courage resonated across the Coalition. It is our honor to answer the call. Return safely and let us catalog this victory. Mara inclined her head. Understood. We'll begin full data transmission. Elias and I will prepare the joint report. As the hologram blinked out, Mara and Elias turned to observe the lab. Quantum engineers from 7-star systems clustered around consoles, watched the vortex of data collapsing into orderly graphs, each point of information confirming stability. Cassandra Lee of the Mavar Collective adjusted a crystalline readout, then gave a nod to Kishan Nruvu, a Zetian xenophysicist. Nruvu's mandibles clicked in what passed for a smile. Chaos contained. Quintessence shall guide our next analyses. Elias stepped to Mara's side. This is larger than any one species. We've tapped into something vast. Mara's gaze drifted to the viewport, where the nebula's renewed glow was almost beautiful. We've answered the call, not just for a debt between two individuals, but for an entire galaxy. Now we must ensure the rift's energy can never threaten again. Epilogue. New beginnings. 3 days later, the Aurora's light nestled in the orbit of Valara Prime, an emerald-hued planet whose swirling cerulean oceans mirrored the nebula they had just quelled. Representatives from the Zetian Council, Mavar, Synod, and Terran Senate assembled aboard the flagship Resolve Eternal for a historic convocation. Admiral Corrin presided over the ceremony, flanked by interstellar dignitaries bearing ornate insignias and ornate robes. Mara Teshi stood at attention, Elias Caro at her flank, as holographic projectors displayed the once unstable quantum rifts, data, calendars of resonance spikes, overlay charts of coalition modulation, and live-funded proposals for a joint research consortium. The assembly hall ceiling, an immense transparent dome, showed Valara Prime's verdant surface below. A gentle breeze rippled through the hall's climate-controlled air, as though the planet itself exhaled in relief. Captain Teshi, began Admiral Corrin, voice amplified throughout the chamber. Your bravery and that of your crew, and especially of Dr. Caro and his engineers, have prevented a disaster of galactic proportions. In recognition of these deeds, the Coalition awards you the Medal of Cosmic Unity, the highest honor any captain may receive. A ripple of applause filled the hall. Mara's cheeks warmed. She stepped forward, accepting a slender, crystalline metal ensconced in a reflective silver frame. Its surface bore an intricate etching, interlocking triangles forming a three-pointed star symbolizing unity among worlds. "Admiral," Mara said into the microphone, "I share this honor with every engineer, every officer, and every scientist who stood firm. Let this be a reminder. When one life is endangered, we all answer the call, because together, we are stronger than any rift." The assembly rose, offering a standing ovation that echoed against the dome. Elias turned to Mara, eyes shining. "You did it, Ma. Captain, you lived up to the legend." Mara shook her head, breathing deeply. "No, Elias. You built the first stone. You showed me what kindness could achieve. Today, we built a cathedral." 2 hours later, in a smaller side chamber, a symposium convened a council of quantum engineers and xenophysical researchers. Mara and Elias co-chaired the meeting. On a holo projection, they displayed detailed schematics of the Nuller network, how coalition ships would maintain sentinel arrays in the Sirana Vale to monitor any emerging resonance patterns. Mavar Representative Cassandra Lee's mandibles clicked. "With continuous subspace monitoring and periodic refresh pulses, we can ensure the rift remains stable. The energy demands are high, but through rotational fleet deployment, we can share the burden." Keishan Naruvu added, "The Zetian Armada will contribute 4 dreadnoughts permanently stationed as relay nodes. We propose an open data sharing agreement. No proprietary claim to the Rift's research." A Terran Star Coalition envoy, Captain Richard Donovan, leaned forward. "We have the resources to support rotating 25% of our quantum lattice infrastructure. We believe that mutual cooperation must transcend any claim of territorial jurisdiction." Elias tapped his stylus on the holo tablet. "Then, it's settled. We'll establish the Sirana Nexus Command, an interstellar oversight body. Its charter: maintain stability of the rift, promote scientific collaboration, and ensure transparent data dissemination." Mara closed her eyes, imagining the future. Fleets crossing the expanse not as antagonists but as guardians. Scientific teams from distant systems sharing breakthroughs. Children on Valoran academies learning that the rift never signified a weapon, but a unifying force that saved billions. She opened her eyes and faced the assembly. The Sirana Vale once threatened to sunder the galaxy. Now it binds us, reminding us that compassion, even an act as simple as saving a human in need, can echo across light years and rally entire fleets to solidarity. A hush fell, then a swell of agreement erupted. The Sirana Nexus Command's founding charter glowed in holographic text before them, ready for signatures. As diplomats and scientists moved forward to append their seals, Mara Teishi and Elias Caro stepped aside, realizing their personal journey had transformed into something far greater. Outside the conference chamber, the gleaming hull of the Aurora's IMR light caught the last rays of Valara Prime's twin suns. Below, a flotilla of coalition vessels twinkled like sentinels in the emerald atmosphere. Somewhere beyond, the Celestial Dawn, rebuilt, refitted, her hull bolstered by coalition engineering, prepared to depart for far-flung research stations. Mara and Elias stood on the observation deck of the Resolve Eternal, gazing at the scene. "Do you remember?" Elias asked softly. 2 years ago when I first saw you under fire near Haros IV?" Mara gave a wry smile. "I remember you hurling us out of a pirate blockade with a freighter that was barely spaceworthy." Elias chuckled. "Now look at us, standing here as architects of interstellar unity." Mara took his hand. "It only took saving one human to awaken an entire galaxy. Imagine what 1,000 acts of kindness could do." Elias squeezed her hand. Beyond imagination. They stood in companionable silence, the twin suns dipping below the horizon, casting Valara Prime's skies in molten gold. A new era had begun, one forged by bravery, sacrifice, and the unbreakable truth that when one life matters, countless others will answer the call.